Hello, hello. Welcome to Courage Becomes Her, where we connect and share real life stories. I'll talk with women whom I love and I'm inspired by, women who are experiencing life just like you and me. I'm excited for us to gather together and cultivate confidence, courage, and joy in life and work. Well, hello, friends. Welcome to this bonus episode of Courage Becomes Her, where we are continuing our summer read series. So today I'm talking with author Allie Henny, and we're going to talk about her new book. So Allie is a writer, speaker, advocate minister, and a vice president of The Witness, which is a Black Christian collective, an organization that is committed to encouraging, engaging, and empowering Black Christians toward liberation from racism. So Allie completed her Master of Divinity from Fuller Seminary with an emphasis in race, cultural identity, and reconciliation, and she hopes to be able to lead a church one day. So Allie has been leading conversations about race and racism on her social media and blog, The Armchair Commentary, since 2014, and her posts reach millions every month. She is a proud Chicago South Sider, and you'll also hear in our conversation today that she is happily married for over 18 years and has 2 daughters. So Allie's book is I Won't Shut Up: Finding Your Voice When the World Tries to Silence You. And I just have to tell you, wow, my eyes were definitely opened through the journey that Allie talks about of her life of being silenced, both as a child and as an adult, and her journey of trying to find her voice. She shares experiences from her childhood, as well as experiences of racist and toxic leadership, and the tipping point that ultimately helped her to realize that she could assert her own voice and speak out about racism. So that is definitely a topic that I have spoken to many of my clients about, not just Black women, but Hispanic women, Latina women, as well as Asian women. So I know that this conversation is going to be so helpful because I was really encouraged by all that Allie was willing to share of her experiences to help us to just understand. So she shares how we can contribute in a meaningful way to liberation from racism, specifically by actively listening to the experiences of Black people, even when it challenges us, even when it creates discomfort for us. So thank you so much for listening in to today's conversation with Allie about her new book, I Won't Shut Up. Allie, thank you so much for joining me today for this bonus episode of Courage Becomes Her. I'm excited for us to talk about your book here in just a moment.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. So let's get to know you just a little bit before we talk about your book. So first off, where is home? And tell us a little bit about home life.
Yeah, so I live in Chicago now, so that's home. That's very much home. But of course, I always have to mention that I was born and raised in Missouri, and so I hail from the Show Me State. And so I live in Chicago now, and that's also by way of Virginia. So I lived in Northern Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. for a while. That's where my oldest child was born, in fact. And then I moved back to Missouri after that. So I don't know why I always feel the need to shout Missouri out, because Missouri is kind of like not the place to be right now. And it's not the place to really want to be from. But I also am like, I claim Chicago, but then there's also like this whole thing, like you're not really a Chicagoan until you've been here for 20 years. That's what I'm told, that you can't really consider yourself a Chicagoan until you've been here for 20 years. So I have not been here for 20 years. I've only been here for 3 years. So I'm about 15% into being able to call myself a Chicagoan, officially, fully, officially, earnestly, whatever. So yes, I always feel the need to kind of, I guess, qualify that, because Chicagoans very much are gatekeepers about certain things,
Okay.
anything
Yeah.
Chicago. But anyway, but yes, Chicago's home, and
Yeah.
I have two kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. I just celebrated 18 years of marriage to my husband, and
Congratulations.
we've been together for 21 years. So so our relationship, it is a whole person, who can purchase alcohol, and now who can vote. Our marriage is old enough to vote now. So
Oh my gosh. Wow. And you guys you at least knew one another in high school? Were you actually high school sweethearts or just knew one
yeah,
another? Yeah.
yeah. We were actually, high school sweethearts. Actually, it even goes back a little bit farther than that. We are from the same town, and
Yeah.
so we went to the same preschool together.
Oh my goodness.
We were not in the same preschool class. He went like on a different day and time than I
Okay.
did, but we have the same preschool graduation tape. And then
Wow.
he grew up in a farming community outside of the little town. I'm from a small town, and we grew up in the same town, but he grew up on a farm outside of that small town. So he went to a different school. It was like a little rural farm school.
Oh
And
my
then
gosh.
we went to high school together, and we met in band whenever we were freshmen. We're in the same high school class. And so he actually graduated valedictorian of our class, and I graduated in the top 10% of our little class. And we met in band. He played the trumpet, and I was a percussionist. And
Oh,
so I stood behind him, banging a drum very loudly, or playing cymbals, or whatever it was, that I was doing most often behind him. And yeah, we became friends, and then we started dating our junior year, and the rest, as they say, is history.
that's right. Oh, that's lovely. Well, 18 years of marriage and 21 years together that's a lot of hard work right there. So congratulations and well done.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. What's a current obsession of yours? Any genre?
Oh goodness. I feel like that I have one of those personalities, like where like I start to do something, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to do that thing and got to be on that thing, and like whatever, a lot. And so let me think. For a while there, it was Animal Crossing on the Nintendo Switch. But I've not had a lot of time to play that because I've been busy with book stuff.
Yeah.
But just like you're kind of catching me like right on like a new wave of like a kind of new sort of thing or whatever.
Okay.
But so it's kind of two things right now. But it's American Gladiators, which was like my favorite show whenever I was a kid. I loved American Gladiators. And so
Wow.
there was like a documentary that I actually need to watch because it came out yesterday.
Oh, okay.
My other current obsession, sort of prevented me from this obsession, from keeping on with my American Gladiators thing. So I'm kind of like, there's things that are competing for space right now. But I saw there was a 30 for 30 documentary that ESPN did on American Gladiators, and there's a Netflix one that came out yesterday that I need to watch. But I've been watching old episodes of American Gladiators on YouTube. And so then,
Oh,
of course, watching
wow.
those old episodes of American Gladiators on YouTube, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to play the American Gladiators like original NES, like Nintendo game. And
Oh
so
my gosh,
I
that's
actually
great.
still have my Nintendo, and I still have my American
Wow.
Gladiators game. But the reader on my Nintendo is broken, and my brother-in-law is like an electrical engineer, and I need to get him to like fix it for me. But anyway, yes, so that's kind of been my thing.
I love it. That is definitely an obsession, which is just so fun to see you light up about that. I love it. Super, super cool. Okay, what has filled your cup in the last few days?
Oh, I guess that I'll say having my sister and my kids and my husband at a book launch event that I did in the South Chicago suburbs. I'm the vice president of a faith-based nonprofit called The Witness, which it's a Black Christian collective. And we had a conference this past weekend. You all probably hear it long after the conference and stuff is over, but part of the conference was doing a book launch event for me. And so my sister flew in from Pittsburgh and she came and did my makeup, which was kind of cool because she also did my makeup on my wedding day. And so she was there doing my makeup for me. And so it was good. It was good just to have her around. My mom wasn't able to come. She was unable to travel to be there, but my sister was there. And then my kids, who were 9 and 6, they got to be there with me and hear me do a reading from my book. And my 6-year-old was all like, I was reading after a while. My husband said, she was like, is mommy done yet? so they were excited to be there. My 9-year-old, I think, grasps a little bit more of like, oh, this is like a really cool thing. For my 6-year-old, it was the inconvenience that was keeping her from one of our neighbors' birthday parties. And she actually asked me, she didn't ask me directly, but she asked my husband. She was like, well, maybe mommy can change the conference so I can go to the birthday party. And so I was like, oh my goodness. But anyway, that was really great to have them.
I love that for you. That's wonderful. All right, last question, and then we'll talk about your book. What is a book that has transformed your life?
Yeah, so I would say the book Ella Baker and the Black Freedom Movement by Barbara Ransby. I had to read it in seminary. Incidentally, it was for a class that I took on Martin Luther King. The seminary that I went to had a class. In the class, we read a lot of Martin Luther King's speeches, analyzed like a lot of the stuff, thought about, talked about some of his theology, but then also like talking about peacemaking and justice and that sort of thing. And so during my master's degree program, I have a master of divinity, which sounds like really like whatever. Basically, it's just theology, learning about Christian theology, and that's sort of the professional degree that a lot of pastors and ministers have. Not nearly enough. More need this education so they can stop doing harm, but that's a whole other different type of thing. But anyway, as part of this class, one of the things that we had to do was a project. We had some books that we had to choose from, and then we had to kind of compare and contrast Dr. King with the person that we read about. And so Ella Baker, she's one of the great unsung heroes of the civil rights movement. And even before the civil rights movement, she was working for the NAACP. She worked with W.E.B. Du Bois as he founded the NAACP, with him and others as they founded the NAACP. She worked with a lot of well-known figures. She was somebody who started movements and who shaped movements, but she's not a name that you regularly know. I mean, she started the organization that Dr. King would then become associated with, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Reading that book was definitely a life-altering thing for me.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for letting us get to know you a little bit. So your book is I Won't Shut Up: Finding Your Voice When the World Tries to Silence You. And you start relatively close to the beginning of the book to tell some stories around you being silenced and your journey of trying to find your voice. And a couple of the things that really stood out to me about that were kind of, you talk about the roots of some of that being related to insecurity, specifically about not being heard or not being taken seriously by your family, as well as being mocked, ridiculed, laughed at by elementary school classmates of yours. So I'd love to maybe just start the conversation there of those two kind of origins, if you will, of this journey that you have been on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that maybe just kind of that, yeah, not being taken seriously by your family, and then the experiences with your elementary school classmates.
Yeah, so with my family, for the longest time, I was the youngest girl in my family. So I grew up in an extended family. I guess that's the first thing to
Yeah.
say. So I had my nuclear family. I had, my mom, my dad, and then I have a sibling, my sister, who is 12 years older than me. So I had that aspect for some of my early years, and then my parents divorced whenever I was 7. But then I grew up in an extended family, which meant that my grandma, my aunties, big cousins, uncles, that sort of thing, they were all instrumental in my upbringing.
Yeah.
I spent just as much time at my grandma's house, even some periods of time, probably more time at my grandma's house than I did at my own house, at my own address. Or it would be like, my mom would be at work, and I would be at my grandma's house and stuff, and then I would just be at home to sleep, get up in the morning and go to my grandma's house
Mm-hmm.
the next day, or I caught the bus from my grandma's house for school, that sort of thing. And so for a while there, because I had my grandma had 7 kids, and then 6 of the 7 lived into adulthood, and then many of those kids also had kids of different. There's a big age range between my oldest and my youngest aunt. And my oldest aunt, my grandma's oldest child, and her youngest child, there was an age range there. So I had a lot of cousins, but there were 4 of us that kind of grew up all together, and then eventually another younger baby cousin that was several years younger than us, that we sort of helped out with and everything. So I was one of the younger ones in my family, and so with that, I come from a big, loud family, and so it's just the way that it is sometimes. Like whenever you're younger, everybody else has experienced life, and has experienced life maybe more and differently than you have.
Mm.
And so, I don't think that anybody ever like tried to, there was not like intent behind it, but it was sort of like, oh, you're this young, kind of precocious, smart, whatever kid.
Yeah.
And like you're wanting, and you're talking and whatever. And like, we just think that it's cute, but I'm trying to say things like, I feel like I'm trying to say something, I'm trying to do something, I'm trying to whatever. And people are just sort of like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cute, that's whatever. And then as I got older, where then that started, where I became verbose, and wanted to be heard, where that even kind of was seen as a negative thing, because people sometimes perceived that and sometimes people perceive that as disrespect. And so then
Mm.
you couple that with then, not always, not universally, but there were sometimes at school night, and I highlighted one particular incident that happened whenever I was in 5th grade. And there was a shift, really, that I should say, that happened where, with my peers, where at first they were like, oh, wow, she's so smart, she's so cool, she's so whatever. And then they're just somewhere along the line became a shift
Mm.
where certain people didn't really appreciate that. They stopped and I think, and all along there have been people that maybe didn't appreciate that, but there just was a point when it really started to become a problem for
Yeah.
people. So I had to navigate that some.
Hmm. Wow. So fascinating. I think it was really interesting as I was reading the book to just understand, that there are those roots both to insecurity, but also just so significantly to childhood. So you go on in the book to really talk about multiple experiences of racist leadership, toxic leadership, my word, not yours, but hugely self-righteous people, which as you talked through those experiences in the book, it seemed like you were indicating that those were really the tipping point for you, of those experiences that caused you to, one, realize your trauma, realize your woundedness, realize that you had been being silenced, that maybe you just hadn't necessarily named those things yet. But then that also, those were the catalyst, it seemed like, again, to you deciding to assert your voice, assert your boundaries, and to live into a more authentic you. So talk just kind of a little bit about that tipping point experience or experiences for you that really, brought you to the place where you're at today.
Yeah, there were several experiences. I think that you talk about that very well, that you set that up very well. That there were just several sets of experiences that I had as a young adult in some of my formative years as a young adult, where I experienced leadership by people, in particular in the church setting. But I want to punctuate that with that I was/am in vocational ministry. So whenever I say, yes, as church, like yes, as whatever, but this wasn't just like my place of worship. It was also my place of employment. Right. Yeah. So these things were happening to me at work. Yeah. And effectively in my place of worship by people that were spiritual leaders. But it's this kind of blurred line between spiritual leader and bosses. So that's one thing that I think is an important fact to sort of add to this, that it wasn't as simple as like, this is at my place of worship, so I can just, leave and go and worship someplace else. Mm-hmm. This was also where I was working. It was also where I was employed, and, where you are trying to make a living, or in some cases, for me, I was actually in a position where I was putting in a lot of work and wasn't getting paid as a volunteer, with the promise of I was going to get paid eventually once, the economy had tanked and there was a whole bunch of stuff to that. And so I had tried to get other jobs. I was fresh out of college. I had tried to get jobs other places. I had applied for all kinds of positions and couldn't even get so much as a job interview. So, it's kind of that millennial story, I think, that millennial coming of age story of graduating. I literally graduated into the recession, into the Great Recession. I graduated in 2008. I'm trying to get jobs. I'm applying. I'm on monster.com. I'm going applications. I mean, I'm applying. I have a degree. I'm applying for jobs at Subway. Yeah. Right. I'm trying to get, but it's you're overqualified to be a manager at Pizza Hut or something like that. I'm trying to get jobs outside of this institution and just couldn't. So it's sort of I'm here. I feel, that ministry is my calling. That's supposed to be my vocation. But there was always this promise that, as soon as we're able to, so I'm holding on in this position because of the promise. But then you also, another thing, and I'll get more directly to the answer to this question. The other bit of context that I think is important is that I had grown up in a small predominantly white community. Yeah. Where I was born and raised, it was a town of less than 20,000 people. There's a very small Black community there. So I was connected to my culture and that sort of thing. But also I was growing up surrounded by whiteness and having to deal with the vestiges of enslavement and the vestiges of Jim Crow, literally where my grandma's house was. She lived in that house, and it was where basically like a lot of the Black people in our town, if you either lived in the projects on one part of the town, you lived in projects, and then if you were going to have a house built, it was either on one street or the other street. And so we didn't live on the street next to the projects. We lived on the street that was where all these other HUD houses, where they had segregated us into. This is in 1973, after segregation is supposed to be over, but we were still segregated even in that. And so I'm growing up in this reality, and just, my reality, my understanding was just like, white people are racist. White people do racist stuff. And so it's my job as a Black individual to try to keep white people from their worst impulses and keep them from living into some of their worst impulses. So if I try to make myself and mold myself in a way that doesn't invite the racism, then I'm doing well. So couple all of that then with, as a young adult, going to college in another very, very, very white city, in Springfield, Missouri. I'm for the first time in my life attending a white church, because I had attended Black churches and everything. But for the first time in my life, I'm attending a white church. I'm in this. It's the perfect storm to experience. It's a perfect storm to experience harm. You're young and inexperienced. You're in a new city, away from people that you don't really like. You're getting to know these people. You haven't known these people your whole life. You're getting to know these people, and then being a young Black woman in a predominantly white context with leaders that there's so much of it that I didn't even get into in the book because it was just outside the scope of it. But with leaders in a church culture that was really very kind of, in some ways, was kind of authoritarian. And that was not what I was used to in church. That wasn't what I was used to, but it's sort of, just, again, being young and inexperienced, kind of some of the things that you go along with, some of the things that you think that, like, you can push back and that you can kind of change, you can kind of ask questions, that it's whatever, but then it ends up harming you.
Yeah.
And so I found myself in, it wasn't necessarily just one moment. I don't want to reduce it to just one moment, but there were multiple moments that I had, and we see them in the book, where I just sort of realized that the racism, that the misogynoir, the racialized sexism and stuff that I was experiencing, where I started to realize that I was a grown adult and I did not have to take what these people were dishing out.
Yeah.
And so, at 25, almost 26 years old, there was just a moment that I had where this pastor, this figure that comes up multiple times throughout the book, and some of his influence, some of his issues, some of all those things come up in the book. And I just had this moment where I realized, where he was criticizing me for something. I was getting publicly criticized. I was getting publicly kind of called on the carpet for something that he perceived as a shortcoming, or as this and this and that. And it was rife with, honestly, it was rife with misogynoir. It was rife with the expectation that Black women have to be your mule, that I'm just out here that I'm just supposed to be this this church's mule. I'm out here doing everything, again, mind you, as a volunteer, without pay, and with a prayer and a promise that I'm gonna get paid someday. I'm out here doing this stuff. And the one time that I essentially put my own desires, my own preference, my own whatever above what was going on there. And I say that I put my own preferences above what was going on there. I did what I was asked to do.
Yeah.
I did the very thing that I was asked to do. And I did the very thing that I asked to do. And in doing the very thing that I was asked to do, instead of pushing back and actually trying to do what I would do with more excellence, you see, and you read in the narrative that the thing that the person is upset with me about, I was doing to their specification, and I was trying to avoid conflict with them. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like, so I'm out here. So, okay, you want me to do this thing this way. I actually don't think that it's that great, but I'm going to do it that way because that's what you said. And I'm trying to avoid conflict because the last time that I pushed back and said, well, actually, I think we need to do this better. Whenever I pushed back, you called me uppity. So like,
Mm.
you push back, right? So I went and I just did. I did exactly what I was asked to do, and I didn't do any more than what I was asked to do. And usually I would do more than what I was asked to do. This time I did not do any more. I did exactly what I was asked to do. And I get publicly berated for that. I get publicly, it comes. And so then it was just, and there was just something in me. I was 25 years old. It was a couple of months before my 26th birthday, and I just realized, like, wait a minute, like, because one of the things that they were upset about, one of the things that this pastor was upset about, was it was after the massive tornado that had happened in Joplin, Missouri, and I lived about an hour away from Joplin, and so after the tornado had happened, I had driven to Joplin, and I was hoping to be able to find like some sort of to see, let's to be voyeuristic, let's be honest about that, but also I was hoping to be able to find volunteer opportunities. But it was hard to figure anything out in that context, because I mean it was literally like the day after the tornado. And so at that point, people are just trying to figure out like who's still alive at that point. But I had gone over there to see if there was anything that I could do to see, because an F5 tornado, that's not something, I'm from Tornado Alley, but that's not something the destruction of that is not something that you see every day. So to see and to bear witness to that, but to also see if I could help. And so I gone over there and then had come back. And so then it was like, that was something that I desired to do, but it was like, I'm being told that I shouldn't have done that, and that I should have posted this, that I should have posted a better graphic on the church website or whatever. And so I'm just being, kind of publicly called out on this. And I just kind of had this moment. It's like, you know what? I am an adult. I got a mortgage, I got bills, I got like all these things, and I'm a grown woman, and you were trying to tell me where I should and shouldn't go, or how I should spend my time, or try to tell me that I'm not spending my time well. And that just, there was something about that completely all over me. And I was just like, actually, and I snapped. And the book doesn't even like really convey it, but I snapped in that moment. It was just like, no, like this isn't okay. Like, I do a lot of stuff, and it's like, no, we're like, well, we don't want to talk about, well, I don't want, no, we're going to talk about this, because I lay down my life for this institution, and I go and do something. I take time out for myself, and now all of a sudden, and so that was a moment. And again, I tell all of that because that situation was rife with the expectations that white people and white institutions often put on Black women, and that is that we must constantly be a beast of burden, but that we can never do for ourselves. We can never go and do things that bring us joy, that bring us fulfillment, that bring us, peace, that bring that are desires or whatever of ourselves. We must constantly be at the service and behest of white people. And so in that moment, that was just, I didn't have all that language then, but I knew what I was experiencing, and I was frustrated, and I spoke out about it. So that was catalytic. And that moment for me, I realized, because I had spent so much of my life just kind of dodging the bullets of racism, right? Just kind of dodging the bullets, just kind of, or absorbing the blows, some like I get, and you see that in a few of the chapters that precede that chapter, where people are just doing like, so just saying stuff, doing stuff that is like vilely racist. And I just kind of absorb it and don't say anything, and don't confront them about it, even though I know that it's wrong, and I am upset by it, and I know why they did it. I'm just like, okay, like I'm just gonna, I gotta go along, I gotta fake the funk, I gotta go along to get along, I gotta whatever. Well, in that moment, I realized, wait a minute, I am like, and I know I keep coming back to this, but it's like, I'm an adult. Like, I'm a grown person. I mean, first of all, that tells us how we treat young people in society, and the agency and stuff that we take away from young people, that as a young person, I didn't have the ability to step up with that. And that's like a whole other conversation. And kids and young people should be able to have the agency to be able to speak up and to be able to say that things aren't right. And that's something that I'm trying to teach my own kids, is like, you have the ability to stand up to anybody. Yeah. Like, you don't have to accept mistreatment just because you're a kid. Like, you get to stand up, you get to whatever. So that's something that I'm trying to impart to my own children. But just where I had just had this moment where I realized, like, wait a minute, I am a person. I am a full person. Like, I'm a grown up. Like, I got bills just like everybody else. And you trying to tell me you were, because I think that there's this cultural aspect too, where it's like, you're grown, you have bills, you pay bills, and so like if people aren't paying your bills, like why are they trying to tell you what to do? And so it's like, man, these people like y'all literally are not paying my bills, but you're trying to tell me how to live, like And so that was catalytic. And so then that really opened up for me later in life, recognizing whenever I'm seeing and experiencing racism, recognizing, you know what? I can actually talk back. I can actually talk back to these people, to these problems, to this issue.
Wow. Thank you. That's just absolutely incredible and horrific. Absolutely horrific. Just interrupting this conversation with Allie super quick to let you know about two things. First and foremost, Baker Publishing Group is offering 2 copies to the Courage Becomes Her listeners of Allie's new book, I Won't Shut Up, by you entering through my Instagram, Laurel Emery on Instagram. So head on over there to the July 7th post to enter to win a copy of Allie's book for yourself. And second, will you please think about the woman in your life who has experienced or is experiencing racism, toxic leadership, just anything that is traumatizing about a woman's personhood. Send this episode over to that woman in your life today. I know that Allie's encouragement and conversation about how to find our voices will be really helpful to that woman in your life. Thank you. So the speaking up component, I know that's really the direct focus of the book, is to encourage and empower others to do so. But kind of an indirect focus of the book is to equip us, if I understood it correctly, around solutions concerning racism. You talk about it being a marathon, not a sprint. But you specifically talk about it requiring change in hearts, minds, ethics, and institutions. And I love and appreciate your deep dive on what institutions can do. You talk, obviously, because that was such a huge experience for you, you share quite a bit about what that can look like to change that. But I'd love to hear more just specifically for the Courage Becomes Her community of how can we really, focus on the changed hearts and the changed minds component. Like, how can we learn from your experiences so that we are helping to change racism, I guess, is really the easiest way of saying it. So help us to not be ignorant, and specifically, like, what would you say, like, what are those tangible, practical elements concerning changing our hearts, changing our minds?
Listen to Black people. Listen to Black people. Listen to Black women. Listen to Black people of marginalized gender. Listen to Black disabled people. Listen to people who are going to tell you things that you don't necessarily want to hear and aren't going to tell you how good you are as a person. Not that you're not a good person, not that you aren't putting good into the world, but so many times I see people who they want to make a change. They want to make a difference as far as racism goes. They want to know more. They want to be a good ally or advocate or whatever the terminology is that they want to use. But they don't listen. They only listen to people who make them feel comfortable. They only listen to voices that tell them what they already think about themselves, what they already know, what they already want to hear. And they don't want to listen to the voices of people who challenge them. And sometimes, I understand, listening to voices that are telling you, for some people, the challenging voices might be the Black voices who are telling you, oh, well, racism isn't as bad because you understand, you're in your development, you understand, you've listened to the people who are telling you that racism is a thing. So the voices that are telling you, well, it's not as bad as people are saying that it is, those voices might be challenging. I think that it's important to still listen to those voices, if for anything, to understand how sometimes internalized racism, sometimes white supremacy, sometimes those types of things, understanding the effects. But more often than not, I do not often encounter white people who are challenged by voices like Clarence Thomas or Candace Owens or Tim Scott. I often don't find people that are challenged by those voices. So in other words, I often don't find liberal, progressive white people who are like, okay, yeah, I find some of the things that Candace Owens has to say, I find those things challenging because they go against everything that I know to be true about racism. That's usually not the thing. Usually it's people who are promoting the voices that I just mentioned, that voices like mine challenged them. Yeah. And so they want to then hold up, they want to tokenize somebody like Candace Owens. They want to tokenize people like Diamond and Silk. They want to tokenize people like the Hodge twins. They want to say, well, but these Black people are telling us that everything's okay and blah, 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 blah. And they don't want to listen to people like me who are saying, no, everything isn't okay. Like, these people are saying peace where there is no peace. And I'm saying no, and people like me are saying, no, there's not peace, and there's something that we confronted. Like, the people who I most often encounter who are challenged whenever they're confronted with Black voices, they are most often challenged by people who don't go out of their way to make sure that white people feel comfortable in their thought processes and feel comfortable. So I think that listening to people who are going to stretch you, listening to voices that stretch you, listen to voices. I mean, there are people out there, there are Black folks out there that say things that I don't agree with, that post things that I don't agree with, that even if I agree with the general arc of, you care about Black freedom, you care about this, there are some things I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with how they employ these ideas, how they deploy their ideas or whatever. We can have uniformity without having to have unanimity. We can say, we uniformly, we care about Black liberation, we care about having rights, we care about getting rid of racism, but we don't necessarily agree on the approach to that, on how that happens. But I think that all that to say that I think that it is so important for people to use their listening ears. I mean, I understand that there might be some people that don't hear as well. So your metaphorical ears, whether that's your ears can also be your eyes, your ears can also be your heart, but to actually listen to what people are saying and why they're saying it, and realize too that for people who are from the dominant culture, it's not actually your place to agree with or disagree with, or to rate, well, I think that that's not your place. And what I mean by that is that you can't dictate to a person what freedom looks like to them. You, the person, the captor, you, the person who is, if you didn't create the systems, if you didn't create the issues, you're complicit in them, and you help perpetuate them in ways known and unknown, seen and unseen. You who get to move through the world in ways that I don't get to, you don't get to dictate that. And I think that something that think about that, flip that on terms of gender.
Mm-hmm.
We would say, well, regardless of what our personal convictions are, do people who don't have uteruses, should they really get to be the ones to tell people who have uteruses what they get to do with those uteruses, with those uteri? Do we get to do we get to tell that, like should those people, should they be the main ones dictating that? Now again, we can argue all day with what that looks like, and we can have a lot of discussions, but should the main people making those decisions be people who are not directly affected by the deployment of those ideas, of those laws, of those whatever? Should men be the ones dictating how women get to live and move and have their being in the world? I would hope that a lot of us would think, well, no, like, even if, no, that men shouldn't get to be the main people, the main deciders of how women get to live and love and express themselves in the world. So why on earth we would be, as women, we would be affronted by the patriarchy trying to tell us how to live and move and have our being in the world? We would be frustrated by that. I think that a lot of your listeners who have had to, you've dealt with paying the mommy tax, you've dealt with the glass ceiling, you've dealt with all those things, you would be very indignant if a man just kind of came and told you, well, actually the mommy tax isn't a thing. And you've lived it. And you've lived it. You've not been promoted, or you've had delayed promotion, or your career path has looked different whenever you've lived it. But that's often what white folks try to tell us about racism. Well, that's not really racism. Like that's not the mommy tax. Like, you weren't really penalized in your job because you had 3 kids over 5 years. You weren't penalized. It doesn't matter if the guy who came in after you in the organization is now ahead of you. Like that didn't really happen. Really, it's just that you didn't work hard enough.
Yeah.
Whenever that your maternity leave and that your pregnancy and that all these other things affected your progress, affected your promotion, affected your career path, that. Well, white folks do that all the time with us with racism. Well, we say, well, this is, actually, this thing that happened is racist. No, it's not. That wasn't racism that you experienced. And so I think that being able to sit back and to listen to, even if you don't understand, even if there are things maybe in it that you feel like you have to have an opinion on, and so you disagree with it, being a good listener.
So good. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. Thank you for your insights, but thank you especially for your courage to challenge us. Your book is hard and challenging, and definitely stretched my thinking and helped me to grow. And I appreciate that so very much. So just to close us out, I'd love to know who or what is inspiring courage in you right now as you're continuing on in your life journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I would have to say, some of my friends, I think that are inspiring courage and things within me. I'm friends with a lot of great people who have had a lot of experiences, who've had a lot of difficulties, a lot of defeat, and a lot of things, and it's been really great here. I even had something happen, within the last week that was difficult. Even in the midst of kind of all the great things of my book launching and everything, there was something that happened that wasn't bad, but it was just like a moment that was difficult. And it was great to be able to kind of lean on some of my friends, and for them, to be able to be like, for them to be able to speak out of their own experiences, out of their own therapy sessions, out of their own things, and to be able to provide for me in that moment, and to provide insight and encouragement and things to keep going and to keep meeting the various challenges and stuff as they come. That's something that I found inspirational, just because, I know the lives that some of my friends have, that they lead now, but even the things that they have walked through in the past and the things that they are still walking through, and the ways that they are still having to show up in the world. And some of my friends even, dealing with their very existence being challenged by the world, and being their very existence being denigrated by the world. It's great to see them show up and to see them win.
Thank you. That's so good. We definitely need that type of community. So I love that you have that. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for writing this book, and again for just really helping us to grow and to develop.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I love and appreciate so much how Allie closed us out with the concept of community. You all know that is the heartbeat of Courage Becomes Her, is to make sure that we are surrounded by women who will walk with us through whatever it is that we are going through. And in her book, she has a really wonderful sentence that demonstrates the beauty of community to me, and the definition of beauty to me, that really is, again, what this conversation with her was about, but also what Courage Becomes Her is about. She says, people who truly care about you will listen and hold space for you, even if they disagree. And I think that is really one of the most important takeaways of this conversation, is to allow ourselves to listen, allow ourselves to be curious, give grace, be gentle, be kind, be respectful, be compassionate, and to enter into people's lives, other women's lives, with the desire to listen and to be there and to be available. And in this culture right now, that is a rare commodity. And I think there is such a great reminder in what Allie shared with us today, that we can come together and be supportive and be community, even when we don't fully agree with one another about whatever it is, whether it's this topic or something else. So thank you so much for listening to this conversation with Allie. There was so much more that we could have talked about that we didn't get to. For example, I would highly encourage you to get the book and read about her thoughts on rugged individualism, which totally, again, just goes against this whole notion of community and being a collective together that really works to lift each other up rather than lifting up the individual. So great conversation in her book, a great learning. I truly meant what I said. I was challenged and stretched by her book. There were aspects of it that were uncomfortable, and I just tried to lean in with a spirit of wanting to understand and wanting to grow. And so I hope that you will do the same thing for yourself. So thanks so much for listening to this bonus episode with Allie. We will be back next Friday with another bonus episode of another author. Thanks so much. What an honor to help you to cultivate confidence, courage, and joy in your life and work. Thank you so much for inviting me to journey with you. I look forward to being back with you next week, where we'll hear another story from a woman whom I love and am inspired by and look forward to learning from.